Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am here with the last installment of my first round of my palette tournament. So this year I've been doing this kind of tournament. I started it about a month or two ago, where I go through my whole collection and I battle it against each other basically. So I randomized two palettes, and out of those two I pick which of those I would prefer, and if I had to declare one, which one would I let go of. And after this round, we're going to be complete with the first round of palettes. And at that point, I'm going to reset the wheel with the remaining palettes. And we're going to start at round 2. And eventually, we're going to have a winner. So that is my plan today, to get through the rest of the palettes. I have quite a few left, but I don't think it's enough for 2 parts. I'm going to do them all today. It might be a bit of a longer video than some of the other installments in the series, but fine by me. It's just exciting. And when I get into kind of picking between palettes, I love it anyway. So yeah, I'm excited to get through the rest of the palettes today and see which palettes qualify for round 2. But before I jump into the video, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. Let's jump into the video. I do want to also mention quickly that I have been inspired by Steph from It's Just Steph for this video. She have done similar kind of thing. What I got inspired by was because she compared her 2022 and 2023 ranked palette. No, I think it was the palette from the first half of 2023 versus the palettes of the second half of 2023. So she pitted the last place palette against each other and the first place palette against each other and stuff like that. But I wanted to do something similar, but I wanted to randomize all my palettes instead. So that's what I'm doing. But without any more rambling, I'm going to pull up the wheel and I'm going to go ahead and pull my first palette. So let's see what I get. The Going Coconuts palette from Colourpop versus the Dreamy palette from Nabla. Okay, let me get those. So here we have those two palettes. We have the Nabla Dreamy palette, which looks like this. And I actually haven't used this one too much yet. I only used all of the shades once, I think. And then we have the Going Coconut palette, which looks like this. And originally I thought it was going to be quite easy. And I was going to keep this one. But looking them next to each other and actually looking at the palettes, it's a bit harder than I originally thought. I don't feel like I have enough experience with this one to 100% say this for sure. But I know I love this palette, so it's hard. But I think I'm going to stick with my initial instinct and I'm going to go with the Colourpop Going Coconut palette. So that's going to proceed to round 2. Again, I'm going to pull up my wheel. I'm going to pull 2 new palettes. So let's see what I get. That is the Love palette from Natasha Denona versus... Oh. Okay, sorry, I just realized I have no repeating results on, so I got the Dreamy again. I turned it back on now. Let me take away the Dreamy palette and the Going Coconuts. And also the Love. So Love is the first one. I've deselected the ones I just rolled, and I'm going to roll again. I've ticked no repeating results again, so let's see what I get. The Norvina palette from Anastasia. So Love versus Norvina, let me get those. So here we have those two palettes, 2 more kind of pink toned palettes. We have the Love palette from Natasha Denona and the Norvina palette from Anastasia. And this one is quite difficult in one way because I do love the Natasha Denona palettes. I love the magnetic. I love her formula in general, and I feel it's a bit more fancy. However, this one here is one of my favorite palettes, but it's a bit older. It's hard, again. I feel like if I was picking just from which one I prefer using, I would go with the Norvina. But again, it's older. And I feel like it's so hard letting go of Natasha Denona. But I think I'm still going to do it. I'm going to let go of the Love palette, and the Norvina palette is the winner. So this one's going to go on to round 2. So let me roll again. Through My Eyes. Yep. Through My Eyes from Colourpop versus Amrezy from Anastasia. Let me get those two as well. So here we are with those two palettes. This is another difficult one. I feel like I'm getting a lot of like equal level palettes today. But this is the Through My Eyes palette. It has a lot of love, as you can see. And then we have the Amrezy palette. I'm staring at them now. I have loved this palette for a long time. I always said that this is one of my favorite Colourpop palettes. It's very underrated, and that's why it's kind of stayed in my collection, although I decluttered most of my Colourpop palettes. And I do still love it, but it's quite old. And I don't have the same attachment to this one anymore. And then this one here was a palette that I really, really loved and wanted for a long time. My boyfriend gave it to me a couple of years ago. I think this one might have been the first palette he ever got me, which I guess gives me sentimental reasons as well. I guess this has more like my type of tones, those romantic tones. But I also don't really like the pressed glitters in here. I feel like there's a lot of repeating shades, a lot of dark shades that I don't use either. But it does have the shade Barb, which is one of my favorites. I think I'm going to go with the Anastasia palette. So this one is going to win, and this one is going to be eliminated. Okay, so let's keep going. We're going to get the next palettes. We have the Divine Rose 2 from Pat McGrath versus Eyes on Me. Okay, waiting for the camera to adjust a little bit because I go very orange because of the white balance. I guess this is fine. So there's a thing with the Eyes on Me palette. So last time in the last update, I rolled the palette filter, which I thought was the Eyes on Me quad from Rowan, which I don't have anymore because I already put it into the last update. But I realized that that palette is actually this palette right here, which is from Charlotte Tilbury, and this is the Exagger-eyes Bigger Brighter Eyes filter. And I think when I got it on the box it said filter, and that's why I put it in like that in my spreadsheet. But now I think about this one as the Exagger-eyes quad. So that's going to be that palette. But let me also pull out the Divine Rose 2 and we can compare. So here we have the palettes. And I feel like, well, first let me show you them. This is the Pat McGrath Divine Rose 2. And then the Charlotte Tilbury Exagger-eyes quad. And this is hard again. I feel like this color story is really not my favorite. It's not my favorite Pat McGrath palette. And the special shades aren't that as sparkly as some of the other ones that I like. And then we have this one here, which is only a quad, but it does have some really good everyday staple shades that I know I can use over and over again. And I feel like if my collection was smaller, I'd probably prefer to keep this one than this palette. But I feel like it's insane keeping a quad over like a Pat McGrath palette. But I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to stick with my guts, and I'm going to sound insane because I'm going to keep the quad from Charlotte Tilbury over Pat McGrath palette. Yeah, I'm doing it. So this one is being eliminated and the quad is being put forward. Okay, let me pull again. That's the Subculture palette versus the Nude Light Obsessions from Huda Beauty. So here we have those two palettes, and this here is the Subculture palette, but you might see that this one doesn't look like the original Subculture palette, and that's because I decided to combine my Subculture and my Jackie Aina palette, one of my favorite shades, and make this palette, and I love, love, love this palette. I love how it turned out. And then we have the Nude Light Obsessions palette, also a palette that I really love. So that's those two palettes right here. I feel like initially this one is more my like up my alley for like an everyday color story because I love those romantic tones again. But I'm just in love with this palette, and since it is my like favorite shades from two different palettes, I just love it. I love the range that's in here. I love how this is like autumn in a palette to me, and I'm really proud of creating this one. And I think this one is going to win. I feel like this is a beautiful palette too, and I do love it too, but it's more of a repetitive color story in my collection, and it's not as versatile either. So I'm going to let the Subculture palette move forward and eliminate the Nude Light Obsessions. Okay, let's keep going. We're gonna have what we're gonna get next. Mini retro palette from Sashimi versus the Rose Quartz palette. Okay, that's gonna be an easy one, but I'm gonna get those two out. So here we have those two color stories, and I mean, yeah, they are quite like different. I was gonna say they're not too dissimilar because they have like pinkier and gray tones, but this one has like some olive undertones to it. I really love the tones in here, and I do love this palette a lot, to be fair. But I absolutely adore the Rose Quartz palette. This one also has like the grays and the pinks, but this one is definitely more like mauve toned, like undertoned, whereas again this one has more olive undertones. I love both these palettes, but I could not let go of the Rose Quartz palette, especially not against a small palette like this. So this one is going to be an easy winner. Yeah, I just love too many shades in here, and I love the looks that I get from this one, and it's my favorite cool tone palette. So yeah, this one is going to stay, and this one is going to go. Okay, so we have a couple more rounds to go, so let's keep going. We have the Stone Vibes palette from Urban Decay versus the Deep Sea Treasures palette from Cleona. So here we have those two palettes, and it's quite interesting because both of these have like interesting shimmers to them. This one has a couple of mattes too, but this is the Stone Vibes palette. It looks like this, has a lot of love. And then we have the Deep Sea Treasures palette from Cleona, which is full of multichromes. I don't know if you can see any of the shifts. Maybe you can see them a little bit. Yeah, maybe. But those are the two palettes. And this one I actually haven't really used much yet, which is a shame, but I absolutely love this palette. I'm trying to see if you can see some of the shifts. Anyway, I absolutely love this palette because it has my favorite like eyeshadow formula. It has Cleona multichromes, which I absolutely adore in it. So even though I haven't used it much, I know I love this palette. And then we have this palette too, which is one that I like, but it's like not as much of a favorite as I thought it would be. I still like it, don't get me wrong, but it's not as much of a favorite as I thought it would be. So because of that, this one is going to win, and this one is going to be decluttered. Finally, a bit of an easier one. I mean, I feel like the last one was also easier, so we're getting into some easier rounds, which is a relief because the first couple ones were quite difficult. So yeah, we have the winner right here. Let's move on to the next two palettes. A couple more rounds to go. Let's pull two more palettes. We have the Bronze Seduction palette from Pat McGrath versus the Wilderness palette. Let me get those. So here we have those two palettes, quite big, so I'm going to have to lean back to show them. But yeah, this is the Wilderness palette. It's a very cool, colorful palette, and it's a beautiful one from Beauty Bay. And then we have the Bronze Seduction palette, which looks like this. Both of these are beautiful palettes in their own right. This is a beautiful color story, beautiful bright formula with lots of variety. It has beautiful shimmers. It's really, really stunning. Then we have Pat McGrath, which has really blendable mattes. It is very kind of smoky, deep, but like in a good way. It's actually one that I'm going to use this month in my Big Fat Eyeshadow project, and I'm so excited. But yeah, this one is beautiful with the mattes and the normal shimmers, but where this one shines is the special shimmers, and it has some of my absolute favorite ones. So that is this one here. And I like both of these palettes, and I feel like both of these could have been winners if they were paired with different palettes. But out of these two, the winner is going to be the Pat McGrath Bronze Seduction palette. I really, really love this one. Again, it's a beautiful palette, and again, it has some of my favorite special shades. So I need to hold on to this one. So we have 3 more rounds to go. Let me pull 2 more palettes. Sashimi City palette from Kaleidos versus the Metropolis palette from Natasha. Okay, so again, 2 very different palettes, and this one is quite difficult because I love both of these palettes. So we have the Sashimi City palette, actually another one that I'm using in my Big Fat Eyeshadow project this month. And then we have the Metropolis palette from Natasha Denona. So out of these 2, I feel like this is a color story that I like more. I just love these tones, like again, soft kind of romantic tones. These are more peachy leaning, but I love those tones. And this one is just a bit too warm, neutral to me now. When it came out, I really loved these tones, but I don't love them as much anymore. It's very, very kind of orange leaning. It does have some repetition in it too. But this one is a beautiful palette. It has an Natasha formula. It has so much variety to it. It has my favorite type of greens as well. So I do love a lot about this palette, which makes this one really difficult because can like a 6-pan palette beat out this palette, which is one that I still really love? Gosh, this is really difficult. This is probably the most difficult round so far today, which says a lot. My God is telling me to keep this one. But then when I think like, would I actually declutter this one over this one? Also, by the way, both of these palettes are discontinued, I believe. I think that I have some of these special shades in my singles collection, which make me feel better about decluttering this one. But I probably also have a repeat shade of most of these as well. But I think I'm still going to keep the Metropolis palette. Yeah, I feel like I have to, because there's just so much variety in here, and I love this palette and this formula. Even though it's super difficult, this is definitely the hardest one yet. Okay, let me pull the next two palettes. My camera stopped recording when I was pulling, but I got the Sultry palette from Anastasia versus the gold palette. Okay, let me get those two out. So here we have those two palettes, and they are basically like opposites palette. This one is very like cool tone, slightly silver leaning, and this was very warm tone, gold leaning, so kind of like opposite palettes. I love both of these. Again, two discontinued palettes. Natasha recently released the golden palette, which is like a couple repeat shades from here, but I'm quite disappointed with that palette because it's missing all of those like greenier tones and like turquoises and stuff, which makes this palette unique, but that's a rant for another day. But out of these two palettes, I love them both, like I said, but it's an easy winner still because I absolutely adore this palette. I always say this is one of my favorite palettes in my collection, if not my favorite. I've said it's my favorite palette for years now though, so it's probably my favorite palette in my collection. And I was lucky enough to get this one just before it was discontinued, so it's still quite fresh in my collection, but it's getting some big dips in it, as you can see. But yeah, this is an easy to keep, so I'm going to let go of the Sultry palette, even though this one is a beautiful palette too. It stands no chance against the gold. And we have come to the last round, which means I don't even have to roll the last palettes because I have them right in front of me. We have the Rowan 75 Degrees Quad, as well as the Mountain Trail palette from Sydney Grace. So let me hold them both up at the same time. These are the two palettes right here. Again, quite different. We have the Rowan Quad again versus the Mountain Trail palette. And I don't know, it's these two palettes, I like both of them. None of them are like an absolute favorite. I do, but I mean, I know which one is going to be the winner, and it's going to be this one because I do love these type of greens. I've said before that I think these greens can be like neutrals on me. I really love this type of undertone when it's like the warm kind of yellowy like browns, as well as these like olivey toned greens. These are like neutrals to me, and I love wearing them. So I just noticed my microphone cut off, so I hope I didn't miss too much, but I was saying that this one here like could be like everyday kind of neutrals to me. It could be like, I love wearing these like yellowy toned browns as well as olive tones. I absolutely love wearing those, and I can wear them like every day, especially in autumn. I love those tones around them. And then with this palette here, I do like this one too, but it's more of a one and done kind of palette. And for that, I would much rather reach for my multi-chrome eyeshadows, which means I don't get enough use out of this one. And because of all of that, I'm going to keep this one. Again, it's an easy choice, even though both of these are kind of mid-range palettes in my collection. I'm still going to let this one win for this round and eliminate the Rowan Quad. So my microphone died again and it's completely dead now, out of battery, so I'm going to wrap up the video without it. I hope that's okay. But yeah, that is going to be the last palettes. And we are completely, like, official complete with round one. I'm gonna take some time this evening to write down all the palettes that won round one, and I'm gonna make a new spreadsheet for round two, and in a couple weeks, I think, maybe 2-3 weeks, I'm gonna upload, maybe less than that, we'll see what my schedule does, but I will upload the next installment, which will be the start of round 2. But I really hope you have enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think of this series, and which palette you think is going to win it all. I actually don't know yet, but I don't know. I mean, I did say like the gold palette, for example, is my favorite palette, but who knows? It depends on who, like, what it gets pitted against. But yeah, it's gonna be quite exciting, and also see what, like, which palettes get through before that point too. But again, that's gonna be it for today. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye guys!